All right, let's get started here. We're right at the hour 9:01 here in the Pacific California time zone. I'll kick us off here. This webinar is titled AI and the Creator, and obviously it's about artificial intelligence as it applies to creative professionals. And there's no way that we could cover this entire topic in 1 hour, but I think we can scratch the surface and leave folks with some ideas on just the direction of where things are right now and where they're going, just so that we kind of have a vector of where things are. So before we start the conversation, I want to do some quick introductions of who's on the panel. So we've got some brains here. We've got Rick Grandy. He's a principal solutions architect at NVIDIA. We've got Narayan. Narayan, I'm not gonna try to pronounce the last name. I can't do it. He's a senior principal engineer and director at Applied Machine Learning at Intel, that little company. Also, Kelsey Huebner, she is a technical program manager at Microsoft. And last but not least is Evgeny Tchebotarev. He is the chief growth officer at Skylum. He connects artists with creative tools they love, including Luminar and other pieces of software. And my name is Frederick Van Johnson. I am your host today. I am a ex-US Air Force combat photojournalist. I used to run the board at Brooks Institute of Photography in Santa Barbara, still a photographer. I run a little organization called This Week in Photo, which is a community of photographers, educational resources, and all sorts of stuff like that, and goes on and on and on. I did a little bit of time in corporate America at Apple and Google and those sorts of companies, and then kind of left, and now I work from this little home office box. So that's the stage. That's who's talking to you today. I get the pleasure of talking to these folks who know mountains more about AI than I do. I am the representative, ignorant in a good way, person about artificial intelligence. I'm like the everyman in the crowd that is interested in what this stuff can do. I use it probably more than I know than I use it every day. But I want to dive into that a little bit further. So I want to give each of you a chance to kind of give us a little bit of kind of background story on who you are and what you do on a daily basis. Kelsey, I wanted to start with you. I'm excited that you're here on the panel because you are, in a group at Microsoft that many of us wish we could be at right now. So tell us about that. Tell us what you do on a daily basis.
Great. So I'm Kelsey Huebner. I am a technical program manager in a customer engineering org at Microsoft. So we go in and we try to solve really tough problems with our customers. Currently, I'm working really closely with media, very large media companies, to be able to bring their workloads to the cloud, whether that's production workloads or really focused on AI ML. So I can kind of bring that perspective in from here. Before that, I was working really closely with Twitter and Pandora Music and Facebook, working more on like Windows applications and Xbox. So for the past 7 years, I've been really in the media space here. Prior to that, I went to the University of Iowa, so I'm a proud Hawkeye, and I focused on, studio art as well as computer science. So I was able to really find kind of that technologist niche while I was there. I worked really closely with a professor there for human-computer interaction and really found a passion working with children with autism on the spectrum, children with chronic headaches, and using touchscreen devices in order to help them communicate better with their teachers, with their doctors. So I kind of take that passion everywhere I go to be able to use technology to help folks communicate. And while my tenure at Microsoft, actually, I also worked in our CTO office. So I work for the Chief Technology Officer, Kevin Scott, and Kevin's team, along with him leading our Microsoft research, is really focused on what's that future at Microsoft? What's the future that we're impacting 3 to 5 years plus out? So I learned a ton around AI, working with OpenAI, different initiatives there. So I can bring some perspective as well in for, ethics and inclusivity of AI.
Love it. Love it. Cool. Well, welcome to the panel. I'm looking forward to picking your brain on this stuff. Narayan, how about you? What's your backstory?
Hi, everyone. I call myself a technologist and a geek with a creative streak. I have been at Intel for 22 years now. I've done different things at Intel, the last avatar being AI ML techniques and using those in different verticals, and particularly in content creation. That's my day job, but I also have a passion for making movies and documentaries. I've made a couple of Bollywood movies, so I have an IMDb profile. You can go check it out. And so I'm passionate about bringing stories to life. And so this job is somewhat of a dream come true, where I use some of my technologists and technology aspects of it and really kind of pointed to the passion that I have, which is bringing stories to life. And in my day job, I work with studios, animation studios, big studios, and seeing how AI can help augment the content creation workflow as it stands now, and really kind of help the creators focus more on their creativity versus doing all the grunt work that's necessary, and in some ways going and democratizing that process. So that's me.
Yeah. And that's part of the line that we're going to talk about is where is that line of handoff between the human and AI, and where does the AI augment and assist the human and not take over, as a lot of people fear, right? So we'll talk about that. Rick, what about you? What's your superhero origin story?
Okay, well, I did about 25, 26 years in visual effects and animation, primarily digital character creation and design, skin and muscle systems, and then got into more of a development role, kind of asset management, production management systems, and kind of the overall technology process, research and development. And I've been in NVIDIA for about 3 years. So my main job is to work with studios and creators and figure out how to solve hard problems. You know, there's a lot of solutions out there, and AI is one of the tools in the toolbox. So we're looking at whether it's virtual production or traditional content creation. Kind of new techniques for relocalizing, animation and generative content, because everything is global now. Like, you don't want to make something for the US market, you want to make something for a worldwide market. So being able to take your content and, distribute it globally is, kind of a big initiative, whether it's games or animation or filmed footage. So we're just trying to help people stand up solutions that will kind of meet the needs of whatever the problem is now and with the latest technology.
Love it. Love it. Again, another big brain on the panel to throw questions at. And last but not least is Evgeny. So Ev, you're at Skylum. What's your major function over there? And tell us your origin story.
Well, as you rightly mentioned, I've been at Skylum for about 3 years now. Before that, I've been known in small circles as a founder of photo sharing platform called 500px. So photography is a passion of mine, been a passion of mine for over 20 years now. And that actually, my connection to the creative industry is taking photos myself and also helping empower creatives with the tools, whether those are online publishing tools like 500px or creative photo editing tools like Luminar. So that is, kind of like community oriented is a big part of what I do. But also focusing on emerging markets and markets in Asia. That is mostly my day-to-day job right now. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, you're the perfect person, Ev, to kick this conversation off with Luminar AI. This isn't a webinar about that software in particular, but the AI part of it. So as a major software player in the creative space, what is Skylum's philosophy with regard to AI? And to drill that down a little bit, is it someday the robots will just do everything you want them to do? You just say, I want a pretty picture and it will crank it out? Or is it augmentative? Tell us what the philosophy is.
Right. So first of all, we already getting some really good questions in the chat from attendees. So thanks a lot for dropping those in.
Keep them coming.
Yeah, keep them coming, of course. And for Luminar AI and other major photo editing apps out there, AI is becoming a part of life. So you will see more and more tools using AI. Whatever that means, we'll probably discuss in a few more minutes. But the key is that we are focusing on the results. And that is the major aspect of philosophy behind Luminar AI, where the creators don't necessarily, we've seen the influx of new creators that are using Instagram, they're using other photo sharing platforms like ForMPX and others. And the key is that for new people, they are not necessarily coming from the film or the manual photo editing era. So a lot of those tools are actually lost meaning for them, because for old folks, we know what dodge and burn means, because that is physical thing that we used to do. But now people just it's like the save icon on the computer that looks like a diskette. That is irrelevant for younger people. So we have to rethink, and we have to reinvent new ways, new symbols, and new ways of introducing the same photo editing tools, and using kind of like injecting a bit of AI, because that's what's expected. When you're taking a picture with your smartphone, there's a lot of AI that's happening in the background, but nothing is getting shown to you in the process. And the same thing with everything, like calendars becoming slightly more powerful, creative tools becoming slightly more powerful over time. And I think that's where the transformation is going to happen, that we don't think of how it helps our lives until we encounter the old way, and we think, oh, this is really outdated, how big of a gap it is now, because it just suddenly enters our life. And as soon as become commonplace, we don't think of that as an AI. We just think of it just as a regular technology. I think we all know examples out of this, like automatic exposure in cameras. This is a very basic, rudimentary AI, so to say. Somebody wrote an algorithm, make it happen. And now we just think of that as like, of course, you're going to have automatic metering instead of doing it manually. So that's where we're now.
That's good. Kelsey, can you piggyback on that? Just from a what AI can do for us standpoint, as kind of applied as this discussion is to creators. Where is that line? We kind of alluded to this at the beginning of this webinar, but where is the line between helping and taking over, right? So, for example, here's an example. If you look at, like Evgeny was saying, I use the analogy of automatic transmissions versus standard transmissions, right? The automatic transition is kind of an AI, and now we're looking at self-driving cars, which is a smarter AI that can look around and make intelligent decisions. Where is that line, though? And when cars start driving themselves and you just get in it and it takes you where you want to go and get out, is that the end of the road? What do you think? What's your perspective on all this?
I think when we think about artificial intelligence, maybe taking a step back a bit to what it means in engineering, is when we're developing software algorithms, we're being very prescriptive of what we want something to do, right? So that's the human telling the computer what to do. But when we think of AI, it's more of being able to handle ambiguity. A self-driving car, it handles ambiguity, and being able to learn from data that you've passed into it. And so we are kind of building some intelligence or reasoning into what we want it to do. We may hit a point that with self-driving cars in particular, there's that question of it when you see a pedestrian and the person in the car, what is it? What's the decision there? I think that we have to make everything human-centered. We have to be designing AI around humans, and that we have to be addressing these issues far ahead before we ever even get to that point that AI may be taking over what we're doing. I think what we're seeing right now is that it's more taking over, or we're using it more as an engineering practice to do trivial tasks for us. Some image processing for us, maybe things that we do constantly that we have to reset up whenever we're about to do something in photo editing or production, and it's able to do that for us. So I would say we're more at that phase right now. And as we're thinking ahead, we have to be thinking of the human-centered approach to this. Hopefully that answered.
Yeah, I agree. And that question that you brought up, that's literally on my list. Like when you look at the self-driving car question of, hey, I could save the passenger of that's in the car, or I could run into that person that's in front of me, but I have to make a decision on which one. How does it make the choice? And then it goes back to, bias, which we'll talk about as well. how does it make the, do we automatically program in bias because we're humans, right? And we're creating these AIs. Does that flow in and infect the computers as well? So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Narayan, I wanted to get your thoughts on just the overall landscape of this stuff, of AI, and from your perspective, what is AI and how does it apply to the work that you're doing and how can it help?
Yeah, I think maybe even stepping back to the previous question, I see even AI, the three possible explanations of what that A could be, right? So one is the artificial intelligence. The other explanation for that A is authentic intelligence, which I call human intelligence. And then the third piece is the augmented intelligence, which is how do humans and the artificial machine intelligence kind of work together, right? I think and then even within AI, there's the artificial narrow intelligence, which Kelsey alluded to, which is, hey, take some specific tasks, do that well, do that repetitively, do that consistently, do that rationally. So that's the ANI, artificial narrow intelligence. There's the artificial, general intelligence that people are worried about, which is a sentient piece, which is, hey, is it going to take over? So
Skynet,
I think,
right?
so I think I want to kind of lay that landscape since you asked for that as to how I think about it. I think we are squarely, when we think about problems that businesses are trying to solve, it's in the realm of sort of artificial narrow intelligence, which is, hey, here is a particular task. Here is a set of things that we can go do with the given data, whether it's photo compositing, whether it's photo manipulation, whether it's video rotoscoping, or a bunch of things. Those kind of fall into that very sort of defined set of things to go do with data, right? And so in that perspective, what my team and what we try to do is, I'll give you some concrete examples here, is in the content creation workflow as it stands now, there are tasks that essentially are possible to go do well and do better with machines. Repetitive tasks, grunt work, think rotoscoping, think painting out pixels that 1,000 people are doing now, right? So those are things that we are trying to kind of figure out and focus and see how we can help augment those tasks. And the second piece, which is how do we interact with the creators? I think one thing which we are making super explicit and clear about is the control point at the end of this game is still with the human and the creator, right? Which is, hey, here are a bunch of choices. Here are a set of possibilities, but you make the decision. Like you take that and say, I like that, I don't like that, I want to go do something different. Versus saying, hey, here is a solution, it's the be it all, end it all, right? Which kind of takes the human out of the loop. So those are the two key points I wanted to kind of make, which is from a context of where I said, which is one, hey, specific tasks, repetitive pieces, there are possibilities to go make happen with technology and technology better, but at the same time, keep the human in the loop while doing that. So I'll stop there.
Now, Narayan, when we say artificial intelligence, or like you said, augmented intelligence, when we say that, or when we use the term machine learning, are these the same things? Are we using those terms interchangeably? And can you break that down for us, what the difference between machine learning versus artificial intelligence, or is one a subset of the other?
No, great question. I get this asked all the time, right? Which is, how do these kind of play into each other? There's still a lot of confusion in terms of the boundaries and the grain sizes of these, right? But in general, if you think about it, I see artificial intelligence as the big bubble, and within that there is machine learning, which falls within artificial intelligence, and within machine learning, which is largely rules based, and there is a set of rules that we can go actually clearly point out. Within that bubble is deep learning, where there are a lot of hidden layers. And I might get a bit too jargony here, but within that layer is deep learning, where it's slightly harder to go parse out how the machine is making decisions. So think of artificial intelligence as the top one, and then there is machine learning within that bubble, and then there is deep learning within that bubble. And if you think about even artificial intelligence, depending on how that is being applied, there are two types. One is what is called weak AI or strong AI, right? Weak AI is, again, task specific, which is artificial narrow intelligence. And strong AI is like, hey, there is artificial general intelligence. And there are always these talks about artificial super intelligence, which is your Skynets and the fancy dreams. So that's how I would break it down, if that helps.
Okay. That's very helpful. Yeah. So one is, yeah, it is a subset. Machine learning is a subset of the overall AI. Lots of questions for you guys. Rick, what about you? Like, what's your overall perception of what AI is and how it applies to the work that you do on a daily basis?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to look at what it's trying to accomplish, and I think the main thing is it's trying to make it easier for people to achieve their vision. So, like we were talking the other day about like how like focus in schools used to be on the content and the creative aspect of it using traditional media, and then it's become a point where people are learning tools. And we want to get back to the creative aspects of things. You shouldn't be spending all of your time learning a tool. The tool should be an extension of what you're doing. So if we can learn through example, like with deep learning, the idea is that the computer is developing the algorithm based on a whole bunch of examples that you're providing it, whether it's learning how to drive down a street, or whether it's learning how to reproduce someone's voice. We're giving it examples, and it's creative. So it opens up a whole world of possibilities. Like there was a question about can I talk to my camera and have it change lighting and composition exposures completely, and you can do that now. It's basically things are going to be not just a singular network. It's going to be lots of networks working together. So things going to recognize your voice and take that voice and translate that into words, and it's take those words and parse the context. Oh, it wants me to change the exposure. And then multimodal will be like, well, what is he looking at? Okay, you're looking at this part of the image. We'll change the exposure over here. So as you add things together, it even goes into the whole like self-driving car thing. Right now we're thinking, well, the car is acting on its own. But with smart cities, you have cameras around there, and there might be cameras that are communicating with the cars so that, oh, there's a pedestrian that's walking into the street. I'm going to alert the cars that are, in that neighborhood to slow down or do whatever. So as we get more and more of this information in this kind of like IoT connected sensor world going on, I think, a lot of these automated systems are going to have, I wouldn't say more intelligence than us, but they're going to have more information available to make those decisions. And likely, like when we look at a lot of the stuff in the creative aspect, it's hard for someone to look and learn a million different painting styles. But, I can go take a photograph, and if I'm working with a creative director, and they can go through and, if they're trying to choose, say a new artistic style for a background, they can go through and iterate through a whole bunch of things and see what visually is appealing, and then provide that as reference to the artists. So a lot of it is, how can I quickly iterate through things? Can I generate more examples and then pass those on to people to do their work? And, as we're saying, it's the grunt work we're trying to get rid of. Like nobody likes rotoscoping. We have to rotoscope. But if we can create a solution that will kind of remove that from the equation so that you can concentrate on getting the creative part done, everybody wins.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll get to a point where voice interfaces in AI, like, our Amazon devices or the Microsoft devices, where we can talk to these interfaces and ask them to do things creatively, right? So in the case, Rick, of rotoscoping, you say, you know what, take that red car out. If you could just say, take that red car out. Oh, this is good, but you know what, warm it up a little bit, and affect the LUT, those, I wonder if that's a future. And Ev, I wanted to throw at you, since you are on the ground with creativity and AI. AI is literally in the software name. What does that future look like? Right? Is the future like on the expansive whiteboard in the Skylum battle center, at the end of the day, are you guys saying, okay, if we can get to this point, we've succeeded? What does that look like?
Right. Look, as Narayan mentioned, there is a general intelligence and kind of like bit of verticals that businesses are trying to solve. So of course we're far from Skynet, whether for better or worse. So we actually have to go and look at what problems creators are facing. I'll give you one example. Imagine, and this is just like hypotheticals, but this is something that AI can fix. So something could be you have photo shoots from different photographers, and somebody has exposure, underexposed or overexposed. You can select all the photos and say, I want to equalize exposure on all of the shots. So regardless of the camera model, regardless of this, visually, I want them to look the same. This is something where the numbers themselves, whatever the EXIF data gives you, may not be accurate. So kind of like sprinkling a bit of AI on top of this and learning to, from that might help people to save hundreds of hours, every year on editing pictures, just the exposure type. The same for, having different camera models. Like Sony cameras might have a different color profile from Canon cameras. So equalizing that is very valuable for filmmakers as well. There's always, you gotta use the right LUT profiles just to get the same color. Otherwise it just look out of place. AI can easily just, select all the project, click equalize color, equalize exposure, and you just saved people a lot of prep time, where everybody has to do the checklist, like, do I have the right LUTs? Do I have the right instructions for the people? And, those are like menial tasks. Nobody wants to go through checklist or load the right LUTs in their projects before they start working or before they start shooting, or reshoot if they have problems on the set, for example, whether it's, photography or video. So those are menial tasks that we would just forget about. We already have some of this, like, shake reduction in video, or we have the new Photoshop features to enhance, clarity and sharpness. So all of this will just become a thing that happens automatically. And I think, from Luminar AI perspective, from our team, we look at what are the issues that people hate the most. If you have to retouch every portrait for 30 minutes and you have 300 portraits to deliver, I don't think how much you can love that process, but if we can save it, you the whole afternoon or the whole week of retouching and give you 95 to 99% accuracy on this, that's awesome. This software saved you, thousands of dollars in work right away in just one weekend. So that is something where we can pick those, battles and work to add AI to that, because as the learning comes from repetitive tasks that we have to train AI on. I think the good example is that you show a child banana and the child knows every other banana in the world and knows that it's a banana. But for a computer, you actually have to do the opposite. You have to show 100,000 bananas, and then computer will say, I know what banana is. So for those tasks, we have to prepare photo sets where professional retouchers, for example, they go and retouch tens of thousands of portraits. And then we can train on before and after and tell the system, like, well, that's what you look for. Like, this is the retouched skin, or this is the retouched eyes, for example. So you can train from that. It's not perfect, but it's sufficient for, majority of cases that we encounter.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm curious, as the banana example, for example, and showing a photo of a banana to a kid or an infant, and then trying to train an AI what a banana is. The wrinkle I'd throw in that, Ev, is when processing speeds get ridiculously fast, or if quantum computing ever materializes on a mass scale, then that time becomes a fraction of a second, right? For that computer to understand what a banana is. And then, piggyback on that, Kelsey, I want to throw it to you. What does that look like in the future? If with that example of the banana and teaching the computer and the kid, if we get to that point where it's functionally similar to that computer's learning ability, or even exponentially faster than a human on recognizing objects, because the data set has gotten so large and so complex, where's the line between artificial and human, right? At that point, where do you draw the line? If the computer can Is it a computer at that point, right? If it's that intelligent and can make those decisions that would take a human 100 years to figure out, and they can do it in a split second, where is that line?
So I would say, though it's fast and it can recognize a banana, the computer does not have the context necessarily that a human may be developing around a banana, what it tastes like, holding it in your hand. It's, humans, I think I said this before, but, we reason, we use the context around us, and we're able to, do things from trivial to convoluted scenarios because we're able to use our past experience. Though computers may be very fast and they may be able to recognize the banana, they don't have all the context around it. And so we still have, the very human approach to this, but I think this is still that question that we have to continue to talk about, and we have to bring people into this conversation that aren't just technologists and aren't just, people that understand quantum or where we're going, or deep learning, or artificial general intelligence. We need all types of people in this conversation so that we can ensure that the human part is never taken out of what AI is doing for us.
Yeah. That's I think that's the concerning part, is like, how do you draw that line, and how do you keep the right people engaged to make the right decisions and all that? Narayan, I wanted to draw on your experience in film, in Bollywood and all that. So when I'm really curious if a future, an alternate universe exists where the artificial intelligence algorithm or software, or whatever you want to call it, you can apply it to filmmaking, and from a very high level or early on in the editing process, just give it all the footage and say, make this look like the Jack Snyder Justice League cut, right? I want that LUT, I want the pacing, I want, throw all my footage at it and give me a good starting point that looks kind of like that with that LUT on it, the whole editing process, all that. Are we getting there? Like, are we close to being able to just point an AI at a folder of raw clips and say, give me a good starting point, and have it look at the storyline, the whole 9 yards, and create a cohesive story? Or is that science fiction still?
Thanks for that question, Frederick. I think, I'll lean on my I'll tell you a personal story here, because it's relevant here. So when we started making our first movie, this was back in 2001, and that was kind of when the film to digital transformation was happening as well. We were a group of 6 people. The entire crew was 6 people to make this movie, right? So I wish I had all these fantastic gadgets that we could, and the technologies and the methodologies that I could have borrowed on to make sure that I could have shrunk my time from concept to release, and do it at studio quality, right? That's the sort of holy grail that would be fantastic to go achieve, right? Which is anybody, only with their creativity as input, can go make things happen. Right? That's the holy grail. And to your question about whether that's science fiction, I don't think so, right? I think there are parts of it that are actually happening now. I think we are kind of moving in that direction where there are things that can. I mean, my ultimate dream is I dictate a story to a computer. I'm going to be super controversial here. I dictate a story to a computer, and then it comes out with a demo reel, or it comes out with a short, crunching all the stuff in say like hours, right? Yeah. The parts of those equations are actually being worked on. These are not science fiction, right? So given a set of one-liners, can we come up with a script? Given a script, can we come up with a set of storyboards? Given a set of storyboards, can we come up with a set of set properties? Given a set of set properties, can we come up with scenes and sceneries? And given a set of sceneries and set properties, can we come up with the right set of dialogues and speak it? And given a set of all of these, come up with the right kind of background music, right? And given all this, can we go edit it right? All of these pieces, I believe, are actually actively being worked on. So I don't think it's science fiction. I'm super excited about that. Right?
Yeah. I'd like to add to that.
I would just say, a lot of those have actually been demonstrated recently. You know, there are examples of you know, applications that will like do what you were saying before. You know, look at, you know, like an existing cut of you know, of a sequence, and then look at new footage and select what it thinks would be the footage that you yourself would select based on what it has learned. So you can recut something like that. You know, there's you know, a lot of tools. I think the biggest thing is like bringing all the tools together. Like we talk about like artificial intelligence and AI, usually it's not just one thing. You've got, again, all these little networks that are each doing a very specific task, and then they need to kind of be brought together. And one thing that we're doing at NVIDIA is we have a platform called Omniverse, and the idea is to let lots of applications collaborate with one another. So it doesn't matter who's generating that application. The idea is we want it to make it really easy for you to create a 3D model over here and render it over here and use the best tool for the job. And we can tie it all together, you know, with artificial intelligence for natural language processing. You can now talk to the system, and the system will go in and you know, load in the models that you've requested. Like, I want to see, you know, a starry sky and a tall stone tower, and it will look at the assets that are available and will load them into the scene. And then you can go in and start composing those scenes. And part of it's going to be, you know, looking at like, well, what is the most efficient way of doing something? You know, a lot of times, like if I talk to something, it's longer to talk to it than just click on it. So I think there's always going to be this, you know, kind of multimodal interaction thing going on where we're not just sit there, you know, talking and dictating everything, because it's going to take too long. We're just not going to like point, click, drag. And but like new interfaces are going to be coming up, and we're going to be learning how to pull those together. But I think you'll see, you know, this landscape where rather than all developers are their own little island and everyone wants to be in their own little ecosystem, everyone's going to have to start working together, because you use the best tool for the best job at the time. And then, you know, these standard practices will tie it all together.
There's actually a specific example of what you both just talked about, where Adobe and Stanford, I can share the link to, they trained a model to create rough cuts based on different styles of editing with the same content. And that happened, I think, back in like 2017.
Wow. Wow. See, things are just getting crazy. You know, this is the crazy in a good way, because this is all interesting. And I wonder, this is the perfect group to throw this hypothetical future at, right? So, and is this a plausible hypothetical future? So my nerd brain, looking at all the things that are happening today, I've seen hyper realistic renderings of faces, you know, and deep fakes, that sort of thing. I've seen voices that like from even Cortana, Kelsey, right? That just sound, you can't really tell the difference unless you're listening really hard from a real human and the computer speaking. So we have face, we got this, we've got virtual reality coming and augmented AI. Are we heading towards a future when, I forget what that service was, a Second Life or something like, remember Second Life? I don't know if that's still around, but the immersive virtual reality environment. Are we heading to a space where I can go into a Second Life, a virtual environment, and interact with humans, other humans that have put themselves in that environment, and also hyper realistic AIs that are indistinguishable from the humans, and have meaningful interactions and productive interactions within a virtual environment with a non-human entity? Do you think that's possible? Narayan, maybe you could, or Ev, one of you guys throw your thoughts in there. What do you think?
Definitely possible and already happening. You know, two trends. One, you know, the fakes, as you will, they, you know, you have to look pretty closely to see if they're real or not. So that already requires understanding of technology to start noticing like where on fringes it, like when the body moves a little bit too much, or if the lips are not syncing. That's not just the internet connection gone wrong, but it's also kind of like a feature of you know, those fake videos, for example. But this is early technology. You know, give it 2-3 years. I think there's some great technologies coming from NVIDIA that would help as well. For better or worse, again, there's a lot of very great positive applications for this, as in, you know, allowing great free video conferencing to all the parts of the world, regardless of your of the speed of your connection. And that is a great positive thing, you know, when you go from the, you know, spotty audio connection to crystal clear HD video connection, that can be life-changing for many communities and many families. I remember the days when just moving from Russia to Canada, I had to call back with the phone cards, and those were not expensive, not as before, but again, like nothing like free conferencing anytime, anywhere, with like basically zero cost. And that's the world we live in today. So you just can take another 20 years and say, yeah, we will be like this in virtual realities. We will be buying those virtual sneakers, through NFTs or whatever, because we'll be spending more time in virtual worlds. We're already spending more time on Zoom, for example, in the last year. And as you saw, pants sales were down, but the earrings and makeup sales were up. So of course, like you care about the upper part that is visible and care less about anything else. So the same will happen in virtual reality. If you spend a few hours there, as some people do now, Second Life is still popular. Tens of millions of people are on it. But there's also Fortnite, where it's like 150 million a month or more. And of course, this is your basically brand. This is you. For many people, some of the friends will know you only in those virtual worlds. And of course, we will see that as well. It will become more clear. You'll become more accurate representation of yourself, and you can become a different yourself. Maybe be a little taller or be a little bit slimmer, and things like that.
I think that's a really good point. Because you look at like right now, like there's with all the issues around like cyberbullying and things, the ability to be more anonymous in a lot of these spaces and be able to, put out yourself as you see yourself, I think that's going to be, transformative for a lot of people. So there's the, like the deep fake equation, which I think is, right now the biggest problem with deep fakes has nothing to do with video. It has to do with the misappropriation of content, like just taking a photograph and, labeling it from a different conflict totally changes the discussion. And that's much more pervasive. To do like deep fakes at a scale that are like believable and real can be done now. It's just highly expensive. The compute power required to do it, believably is pretty high. But as things start coming down, the nice thing about those are those same technologies can change my lip sync, and in real time, like I could be speaking in 4 languages on this Zoom at the same time. Like that would be great from a communication point of view, so I could have my voice translated using, the same tonality of my voice into multiple languages, and then broadcast, a video of me synced to those languages to different regions of the world, and those are things that are like developed, researchers are actively working on, and there are tool sets that are available for people to pipeline those now. So.
Yeah, that's useful. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That would be fantastic. Kind of like the Star Trek Universal Translator, but in a Zoom grid. So you choose to hear whatever language you want, or have it written and subtitled in whatever language you want. That'd be fantastic. And folks that are watching this, that are in the chat here, feel free to throw a couple questions in there. We'll get to them in a couple of minutes here. We're coming up on the end of the hour. So we may go a little bit long, but not too long, maybe a couple of minutes after the hour. So throw your questions in there and we'll get to them if we can. I want to throw a curveball into the grid here. So power, right? So power is the great kind, and someone put this question in the chat earlier. If we start building a reliance and an expectation on progress and the things that we can do based on technology, AI is one of those technologies, self-driving cars, etc., even our phones. What happens if the grid goes down, if we lose power? Where do you guys fall in? Kelsey, I'll throw it to you first. Like, what do you think? What how do we fall back on it? Me as a photographer, I would say, well, hey, I could shoot and process and print, with maybe not without power, because I need light, to do the printing, but I could get close to that. Not a whole lot of other technologies can do that. What do we do? What do we do if we get hit with an EMP or something? We got bigger problems if that happens, right?
Exactly. I'm also thinking back to Texas, when they had the bad winter storm and that infrastructure, went down. And so, hopefully that we can rely on our government in order to keep us safe and where we need to be for the power that we need. But I do think that we need to have better expectations and work towards if this does happen, we have some type of backup plan. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what the answer is right now for that.
Yeah. And you also want to jump in there? Like, what do you guys think in absence of
think,
power, Ev?
I think every non-lethal disaster like Suez Canal blockage is also great for creativity and memes, as we saw. So yes, maybe no power is bad, and we should probably have power at most times or all times as we get really reliant on that. But it also sparks a lot of creativity. Imagine the day if you're in lockdown, but there's no Netflix and no anything. Back in the day, gravity was discovered in another lockdown like this, just for people like Newton who didn't have access to Netflix or Amazon Prime. So maybe there are some good things from being bored and being, without, hopefully it's all temporary. Again, it would be a big disaster to be without power for long periods of time, as some countries are facing today. But I think having those reality checks from time to time, I think will make us more grateful over time.
Yeah.
I also think research is going to play a big part of this, just looking at like efficiency. Like people, like the big thing now is about like, how power hungry NFTs are, is kind of like a hot topic. And, I think, as time moves forward, with a lot of these things, something like crypto is kind of its own world of hurt when it comes to specifically trying to make things difficult. But with other technologies, the idea is like to be as power efficient as possible, whether it's hardware or software. And then even looking at like, where can we go, somewhat powerless, like powerless distribute or, things that are, self-powered, like not every IoT device needs a battery or needs, to be plugged into the wall. Are there ways that we can do sensors, that are, self-generating power or are passive? And I think a lot of those technologies could come to the forefront, like, the fact that, our cell phones right now are so much more efficient than they used to be, and we still complain about them. It's because we're giving them a lot more power, to do stuff with. So, and as we look at, the future going forward, I think, the idea is not to have like everyone's going to have a high powered computer on their desk. The idea is there's going to be services available and you are going to have whatever your access device is and you are going to access those services through them. So you will just have your display or your glasses or your phone or whatever it is, and then you will hook up to whatever you need.
Yeah. And like Ev said, in the case of Texas, losing power, I would imagine that a lot of folks over there are bracing for if that happens again, they won't be caught with their, with their pants down. They're going to be ready for the next power outage. So humans learn and adapt. Some of us, learn and adapt by adversity. Yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much to talk about here. Rick, I'm lucky that this hour is almost over because you brought up crypto. And you're from NVIDIA, so I have a bunch of questions for you, but I'm going to hold them because that could go. I know that could go off the rails completely. Narayan, do you want to throw something?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and maybe point out three things as a follow-up to that discussion. Right, I think one is again, I think as Rick pointed out, I think creativity in terms of increasing efficiency. Right, that's going to continue on. The second piece is reliance and backup. So not being reliant on single source of failure, right? So avoiding that and having backups is a second piece. The third thing, which I personally do care about very deeply, is the fact that we're thinking about losing power, but there are folks now who do not have power at all, right? 50% of the world's population still do not have direct access to power. So I think I just wanted to kind of make sure that point is made as well. So three things.
That's
there.
perfect. Yeah. All right, guys, we're in the home stretch here. Let's take some questions from the folks that are watching. I'm going to go to the Q&A first. Looks like there's one from Jim Peters, and there's a bunch in the chat as well. I'll get to those. Jim Peters says, is there any industry focus on using AI to identify when AI-powered video and audio have been used? Kind of like, some sort of tag or something that says the content you're watching has been enhanced or augmented by artificial intelligence. Do we need that? Is that a thing? What do you guys think?
I know there's
yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say I know there's a lot of work around chain of custody, and that's one of the prime first. Basically, can I believe the source? If I know like this is the camera sensor it was shot on that was basically owned by this news organization, and can I believe like it has come straight the full end? That's one thing. As far as let everyone else jump in. As far as what are we doing to recognize things that we don't have a complete chain of custody on? It's
yeah, maybe I can jump in there. And Intel is a part of this initiative as well. So is Microsoft and others, right? So we are working with Adobe's and others in an initiative called Content Authenticity Initiative, where we look at what's called provenance, which is the chain of custody that Rick talks about, which is a source of from the source to the deployment pieces and understanding whether it's been modified through the chain. And there are other initiatives kind of looking at, hey, has this been modified? What's the sort of modification? And putting it into the metadata of the content itself, so that the user has access to it or the consumer has access to it. There's still issues about, hey, is it effective? What's the right form to kind of display it? Things like that. But certainly thought through in terms of making sure that chain of custody and the provenance is actually exposed.
Yeah. I wonder if there'll be the concept of the blue check mark, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kelsey. What were you saying?
That's around the deepfake technology that our companies are all working together to be able to expose this.
Yeah. Thank you so for doing that. Let's take some more questions. Alexander makes a good point. He says if you're interested in the whole Second Life thing, the concept is the metaverse. Yes, Neil Stevenson, and he says best illustrated by Spielberg's film Ready Player One. Yep. So that's a potential future.
I just wanted to note to that too. Microsoft announced a few weeks ago about Microsoft Mesh, which, as VR devices are becoming more available to folks, it's really around enabling like shared experiences from anywhere on any separate device, including HoloLens and all VR devices. So there's a app called AltSpace VR that you can join. You make your person, maybe similar to Second Life, but there's been a lot of focus. Like Accenture holds their business meetings in there, and they can have a whiteboard and they show everything. So since they've been especially remote this last year, it's been a really great way for them to explore all the options that they have there and push the technology.
Yeah, you would think the pandemic and just things like this, right, would benefit from that. It feels like Zoom is very much two-dimensional, and the old days, I think in the future, it feels like we'll literally feel like we're sitting in a room together, having a conversation without the barrier of being in a box.
Yeah, like in AltSpace, when you're standing next to an avatar, you hear them while other people sound further away. So there's a lot of spatial recognition as well.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. Okay. A couple more questions before we end here. Let me read this one, see if I understand it. AI, while keeping the human in the loop, is fine, but I believe there's a huge number of persons that are computer illiterate and without internet access. What are thoughts from the experts? So put a finer point on that. Can AI in areas of the world that have the benefit of technology and power and all these other things that enable these forward cutting edge technologies, do those innovations benefit parts of the world that don't have access to that? Anyone jump in?
Again, I'm particularly passionate about this area, and as part of a joint venture with this organization called Luminar, some of the efforts that we are doing is around using AI for example, plant disease detection for helping smallholder farmers. So that's an example of how taking some of the really cutting edge technologies, but pointing it at problems that 80% of the world actually could benefit from is something that is being done. That's just one example. There are many many examples of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, my knee-jerk reaction would say rising tide raises all boats, right? But that's a gross generalization. Like, what are those boats, and how do they rise, and what does that look like in the end? Does it help with getting water to areas that don't have water? Does it help with safety or vaccine distribution and all that stuff, right?
And in theory, yes, I think the idea is, we look at, AI as a catch-all, but essentially it is a set of tools for solving problems. And so, just looking for, governments and organizations to look at like where to put their research dollars. And, there are more, classical approaches that are great for certain situations, but, looking at, what you're able to do now, through, computational algorithms, you'd be crazy not to look at some of these, social and economic, issues around the world. A lot of it's around distribution of wealth and education. And, I think there are a lot of ways that we can model how things could be better, and how, with the existing resources, we should be able to, raise all boats.
Yeah. Right.
Take time.
Hey, John DeSantis in the Q&A has a good question that that's good for the end of the show here. He says, we all know that there are a lot of bad actors in the world. Is anyone working on AI, or anyone working on AI is also working on protecting the AI from these actors? I would hate for my car to be controlled by someone with less than good intentions, right? Computers were born to be hacked, right? So as we become more reliant on computers in these processes, and they become bulletproof, and it's kind of like electricity in the wall, we kind of forget that until it's broken, we forget about it. What do you guys think about security as it applies to this? Kelsey, you said you guys are working on some stuff in that area. Can you go into depth on that a little bit?
I'd say security should be the number one thing that we're thinking about when we think about managing data in the cloud or on-prem or mixed, and then how we are approaching it there's a lot of technology going into security right now on Microsoft, especially on the cloud and across probably, all clouds. And one thing we're thinking about too is AI is advancing at this remarkable rate. It's going to be celebrated for its benefits, like we're talking about here, but it's also going to be scrutinized for these exact reasons. And so we have to be proactively establishing guardrails around them for all AI systems to be able to anticipate risks such as that, and then be able to mitigate them before it happens. So at Microsoft, we have a Microsoft Responsible AI program. We have multiple boards within Microsoft. So as we're developing AI, through decades of research in MSR, then goes into our products, eventually, opens up to the customer to like Skylum, to be able to add that technology into their application, and then to the consumer. It goes through so much guardrails before it even gets to that point, that we're doing the best that we possibly can to be able to mitigate those risks.
I think it's also incumbent on people themselves to getting an understanding of the ecosystems that you're buying into. Not every website should be considered safe. Not every app that you download to your phone should be considered safe. So just getting a little more knowledge about what you're doing and where your information is going, I think is going to save a lot of people in the long run.
Yeah. Well, looking at safety from a global scale, one of the things that Elon Musk has said is AI is kind of like a new arms race, right? And the first country to get it right is going to win, much like quantum computing, right? It's a new arms race. And once you get it, you basically have the cipher for the rest of the world. And, which means it's an arms race. We got to get it before they get it, right? So how do you guys manage that? How do you think, not that you're in charge of all this stuff, but what does that look like if you zoom out from a global scale on security, with each of these nations independently developing AI and these quantum computers and all that stuff? Do we, as consumers or as minions on the ground, do we need to be concerned with that, or is it all taken care of and government has it all sorted out? What do you guys think? Rick, maybe you can throw in. What do you think?
I don't think it's all sorted out. I think it's on its way to being sorted out. I think everyone should take an active role. I mean, I think the idea is, we are all participants, in this, in this community, in this, global community now. And we should all have kind of like, offer our voices, that voice of reason, because we are not ruled by the AIs, we are ruled by ourselves right now. So I think we can keep it that way as long as we, work together and make intelligent decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Let's hope that right now isn't real. We are ruled by ourselves. Period. In the sentence right there. Evgeny, why don't you take us home, man? So what is the future, not just in image and post processing and that creative world look like? Just kind of zooming out, looking at AI in general from a Evgeny Tchebotarev standpoint. Where would you like to see things in 10 years from now?
Yeah, it really took a dark turn, from AI for creators and then to the global security and arms race.
It's all
I'm
related,
glad-
man. It's under the same umbrella.
yeah, I'm glad we're back to the creative side because, I've seen some questions that people asked whether, well, if you equalize my exposure, then I'm not being as creative as before. But there's two different things. There's a creator as a person who just wants to work on a photo and see their way and their image develop the way they want to. And I think AI is not taking away anything from that, just makes it a little bit easier, like with the sky replacement that Luminar 4 introduced and Luminar AI enhanced. This is something that you could do before. It would just take you half an hour or an hour to match everything perfectly. And if there's a lot of tree branches, then it just makes your job harder. We just made it easier. Whether you use it or not, that's totally up to the creator, or whether you use your skies or you go for interplanetary, intergalactic travels, that's up to you. I think people have done both for hundreds of years with different tools that they have at their disposal. And that's just a new tool that can allow them to be more creative. And speaking for, kind of the future of that, I think, again, for our goal is to get the results. And sometimes it's not necessarily the creative processes that needs automation and needs the AI. It is the boring menial tasks that people do over and over again and don't even realize that they are spending hours and hours on doing those. And so sometimes it's the businesses that actually pay for that. Sometimes it's freelancers that pay with their time and with their effort that, that time could be spent on more creative things. So I'm really optimistic as to the creative part of AI, whether with Luminar or any other, technologies or companies out there, because if I can save, 5% by using AI to schedule my meetings or to replace the sky, whatever I do and whatever those bits of AI will help me be slightly more efficient so I can work less. Hey, I'll take it. For me, it's a very simple equation. I don't want to be mailing back and forth or doing manual retouch pixel by pixel just to get the job done or get a paycheck. So anything that can automate parts of this process, I think will be welcomed by professionals. They count their hours, they count their effort that goes into this. And I think everybody will be better of this.
Love it. Love it. And Ev, where should people go to learn more about the stuff that Skylum is working on? And, where would you direct people to kind of continue the conversation on that side?
That's a great question. I think the best way is skylum.com. Reach out to us. There's many ways through email or social media, but you can start at skylum.com.
Awesome. Cool. All right. And then Rick, couple last words, and where should people go to kind of check out what you're working on and what's happening in the NVIDIA world?
Go to NVIDIA.com. We actually have a large conference coming up in a couple of weeks called GTC. You look up GTC 2021. It is an AI conference primarily, but it kind of covers everything about GPU-based computing, and you'll see sessions on everything from virtual production and AI through natural language processing, and from an engineering level all the way down to man on the street. I want to learn more about it. So it's a free open conference and everyone should attend.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, welcome. And thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure having you on. A ton of questions. So I feel like there may be another one of these webinars at some point in the future where we continue this stuff. Narayan, what about you? Where can people go to connect with you and see some of the things that you're cranking out?
I mean, Intel.com is an easy place to go. There's a lot of AI, fantastic AI work that goes on there. And also, if you want some of the recent work, you can Google Intel and Leica. We did some fantastic work, but the Leica Animation Studios, which they won the Golden Globes for this year, Coraline, Missing Link, etc. So you can Google that to get a glimpse of that work as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us on this panel. Last but not least, Kelsey, where should people go to find out what Microsoft is working on and what you're working on?
I would actually say, follow me on LinkedIn, follow, Microsoft Leadership on LinkedIn. That's where we share a lot of our information and things that are happening. We have lots of products, lots of stuff being launched this year. We have Build coming up, which is the Microsoft Developer Conference. And I just want to note something, representing Microsoft, a quote that Satya actually said, I believe last month, our CEO of Microsoft, and he said, looking into the next 10 years is going to be as much about creation as it is about consumption, which we've seen in the past. So it's really about how should we be democratizing this so that creators have as much opportunity as they can to get their work out there. So, would love to have another conversation around data and what people are doing with their own content and being able to make sure that they own what they should be owning and how to do that safely.
Fantastic. Cool. Looking forward to that. Thank you all for coming on. This has been a fantastic webinar. Clearly, I'm enthusiastic about this topic just because, I'm nerdy and I like technology and I like creation and all this. So this was the perfect conversation for me to have. And thank you all for coming on and doing this. We'll end it right there. Thank you folks that were participating in the chat. I know there are a bunch of questions that we weren't able to get to, but maybe we'll do another follow-up interview and get to them then. So we'll leave it right there. Everyone have a great rest of your week, and don't be afraid of artificial intelligence.